I like going to shows. Truth be told, it's the same drill. If I have tickets to see a show, like that night, I say, I don't know. Where am I going to park? I'm too old for this if it's a rock show. And then I go and I love it. Like that's how it was for Dana Carvey when I saw Dana Carvey at Parks Casino. And I mention this because there are a lot of great headliners of all types coming to Parks Casino. Wayne Newton, Pointer Sisters, Buddy Guy, The Spinners. I've still not seen Australian Pink Floyd. And everybody says, you would love Australian Pink Floyd. My point is, Parks Casino's got a lot more than just gaming, although you can't beat 3,200 state-of-the-art slots, 115 table games, great food, great drink, and an enormous sports bar. And sports book. So, are you ready for some football? These are all reasons to go to Parks Casino and take advantage of all the things that I love describing. Free parking. You never have to worry about parking at parks. Valet parking, and now Parks Casino offers electric vehicle charging stations for all their guests. I think they put that in for me. Check out the all-new Bamboo to savor your favorite sushi items and enjoy a wide selection of Japanese whiskey and sake. In our backyard, if you're in the Northeast, head to Parks Casino, the only casino in Pennsylvania that I recommend. For all things Parks Casino, visit parkscasino.com, Parks Casino and Sportsbook. This is how you win. Have to be 21 or older. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Time now for some headlines from the Monday edition of the Smerconish.com daily newsletter and some things from over the weekend. I never remember on a Monday to say, oh, we posted this on Saturday or we posted this on Sunday. But there are a lot of great things from the weekend and from today that I want to call your attention to, including this, which we ran over the weekend. You all remember Mr. Rogers, right? You know that Mr. Rogers was a Pittsburgh guy? Mr. Rogers as in... It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. I'm looking at a cheat sheet. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? Okay, what's the next line of that song? It's a neighborly day in this beauty wood, a neighborly day for a beauty. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? Why is Mr. Rogers on the brain today? I will tell you why. There's an ongoing theme of this program. It's addressing the subject of polarization, its root causes, how we got where we are, and how we get out of this partisan ditch, right? You hear me talk about it all the time. You hear me cite time after time a number of different books, Robert Putnam, Bowling Alone, Bill Bishop, The Big Sort, Charles Murray, Coming Apart, The Economist from Harvard, Raj Chetty, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Common theme to all of this is it gets better when we get out of our bubbles. And maybe the biggest bubble of all is the media bubble. You got to change that channel and wean yourself off perspectives that are only on the left or on the right. You've heard all of this from me before, right? Okay. So a Sunday headline from Smerconish.com along the lines of Mr. Rogers was right. And in this case, they talk about Fred Rogers always saying, be warm, howdy neighbor, greet your neighbor. Well, this good news story reported the following. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Haven't you heard Mr. Rogers say so? And now his simple advice on how to be a good person has been backed by sophisticated polling data. As part of the Gallup National Health and Well-Being Index, regularly saying hello to more than one neighbor was shown to correlate with greater self-perception and well-being. I pulled the Gallup data because I wanted to see for myself, and indeed, that's exactly what it says. Now, by the way, in order for you to greet your neighbor, I think it would be helpful if you know your neighbors. Do you know your neighbors? This is embarrassing. I can reflect on the block on which I grew up, where there was 20 feet separating all of our houses. And I could run you up one side of the block and right down the other. In fact, I could do the whole 2 blocks that comprised my street, Mercer Avenue. Today, I'd have a little more difficulty. Today, I'd have more difficulty in part because of that line that I never forgot of David Brenner, who grew up in South Philadelphia, the great comedian. And then he said, the first time I went out to the main line, every other house was missing. It was a funny line. I mean, you know, it's nice to have a big house, but you really lose something if you're not connected to your neighbors. And that's the point of this data. Okay, let me just share a little bit more. Averaged across 5 dimensions that include career, communal, physical, financial, and social well-being, the increase which greeting a neighbor had led to around a 2-point increase on a scale of 0 to 100 up until the 6th neighbor, at which point further greetings had no measured impact. What does that mean, Michael? It means that with every greeting of a neighbor, your own self-perception and well-being are going to be enhanced. So, and then after the 6th time you do it, I guess it's diminishing return. Is it causation? Are you feeling better about yourself and your station in life because you greet your neighbor? And now I'm going beyond Gallup. This is the Michael analysis. I think not. In other words, like today, as nice as it would be for you to go out and greet a neighbor. Hello, neighbor. Howdy, neighbor. I don't think it's necessarily going to have a measurable impact upon you. What I think is going on here is that if you're the sort who is friendly toward your neighbor, you're already well-adjusted. Here's another example, something that comes to mind. I remember there was a study a couple of years ago that said that families that dine together, when the kids are young, if you're having a meal together each and every night, then the kids are more successful, they're better adjusted, there are positive benefits. I can remember sitting behind this microphone and saying, it's not so much that you get a benefit from pass the potatoes. I think it says something about you if you are a family that is having dinner together every night. You're intact. You're sharing relationships. It's not the meal necessarily. It's that the meal, this is the way I'll say it. The meal is an insight into what's going on in that family dynamic. And similarly, if you greet your neighbor, I think it's an insight into your well-being, friendliness, and how comfortable you are with those who live around you. That's my analysis. Bottom line, go say hello to a neighbor. Maybe you'll be better for it, for the reasons that I identified. Today's poll question has to do with whether America would accept a determination by the Supreme Court of the United States that Donald Trump is ineligible. I'll circle back to that. Ineligible to run for his old gig. If I had to say as of now, I think tomorrow's poll question is going to be about tipping because of something that we flagged over the weekend from the Wall Street Journal and had in the Sunday edition of the newsletter. Interesting story about a national battle over tipping. No, it's not the idea that we've discussed here before, which is the view of many of you that you're being asked to tip too often. And what I've heard from callers in the past is that you take particular umbrage at the idea of standing in front of some form of an iPad in front of a person who's waited on you and in front of them having to say, is it 15%, 20%, something more, something less, nothing at all. This is different. Servers, restaurant owners, and lawmakers in Chicago are debating whether wait staff and other restaurant workers should be able to earn the city's minimum wage of $15.80 that exists for larger businesses. Right now, their wage isn't that cut and dried. Under the so-called tipped wage system, get used to hearing that, in Illinois and in other states, employers can pay below minimum wage to workers who can also earn tips. So in Chicago, that minimum is $9.48. And there's a move afoot by a group that are activists on behalf of workers, and they say, no. We don't want there to be two different minimum wages. We want there to be one minimum wage, because if the minimum wage for wait staff is $9.48, but the minimum wage for non-wait staff is $15.80, you're leaving this in the hands of the consumers, and the consumers can't be counted on in all circumstances to make up the difference. So the question that, and by the way, it's not just an Illinois thing. The nonprofit One Fair Wage is pushing bills and ballot measures in 25 states to raise wages and eliminate what it considers to be a sub-minimum wage. So the National Restaurant Association is on the other side of that equation, and probably tomorrow we'll delve into this in more detail. if you're like me, you're wondering, okay, if everybody's getting that same minimum wage, $15+ an hour, what happens to the tips that will continue? The ordinance would require employers of tipped workers to pay them the municipal minimum wage. Restaurant owners can then decide what to do with customer tips, including giving them to the server or pooling them to distribute to non-managerial staff. That's what the Illinois Restaurant Association says. So, do we like the system that we have, where you tip your waiter, or you tip your barkeep, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Or should there be a minimum wage for everybody? And if there is a minimum wage for everybody, what happens to tipping then? Maybe we go to more of a European model where it's not expected. We have coverage today at Smerconish.com to those in the path of Tropical Storm Hillary. We wish them Godspeed. Sticking with my food theme, however, and thinking of the storm that's now hitting California and soon Nevada, do you remember, this isn't going to sound very foodie initially, do you remember the family of neo-Nazis? My recollection is that they were from New Jersey and they wanted a Hitler birthday cake for their kid because they'd actually named at least one of their children for the former leader of Nazi Germany. And they called in, I want to say that they called like a ShopRite, and the ShopRite said, no, we're not baking a Hitler birthday cake. And it became a huge to-do, and I this part I'm unsure of, but I think that their parenting was then challenged and that there were other issues there must have been going on with that particular family. Well, Publix is my grocery store of choice in Florida. Love Publix, clean, courteous, never had a bad experience at a Publix. I took note of this. Publix is saying they will not, and we had this from the Tallahassee Democrat at Smerconish.com over the weekend. Publix will no longer make, bake, or sell hurricane cakes. In September of 2022, the Lakeland-based grocery chain came under fire after photos of hurricane-themed cakes from Publix bakeries, which are great, by the way, went viral. While social media users seemed split about the themed cakes as Ian neared Florida, the conversation prompted the chain to then issue a statement. We're now approaching the one-year anniversary of Hurricane Ian, and a check on Publix corporate site for communications explains their new policy where they will not make you a hurricane cake. What is a hurricane cake? A hurricane cake typically has blue icing for water, green icing for the state of Florida, white icing for the eye of the storm, and red, orange, and yellow icing to symbolize a hurricane graphic from the National Hurricane Center. Another, sticking with the food theme, and then I'm done. This is actually with more of a libation theme. You remember, and I talked about it extensively, Kid Rock shooting up the beer cans in the aftermath of Dylan Mulvaney's image being put by, of course you remember, but you know all the background on this, and Bud Light, Anheuser-Busch, has seen sales absolutely tank. You've got beer inventory, I think this continues to this day, still being held by distributors across the country because they can't move the product. There have also been social media images where, at particular sporting events or rock concerts, there will be a display and there's like Bud Light here, nobody in line, and then non-Bud Light, including Modelo. Like, where did Modelo come from? And people are lined up to get the beer. Well, Kid Rock now being accused of hypocrisy because last Thursday night at the Sky Deck in Nashville, and of course TMZ had the report, he who shot up the Dylan Mulvaney Bud Light cans was spied drinking what is believed to be a can of Bud Light. So I always thought the whole thing was like ridiculous. Who cares? And I remember when this whole story broke, I was getting a slice, so to speak, in a New York City, pizza joint, and I had a choice of beer. I went looking for the Bud Light just to be able to sit there and say, like, come on, grow up already. Who gives a damn? Maybe, by the way, he was showing his age because I think that Kid Rock is about 50. Well, how about this? From the Detroit Free Press over the weekend at Smerconish.com, we had this on Saturday. Binge drinking and the use of marijuana and hallucinogens among adults 35 to 50 reached an all-time high in 2022. Marijuana use and vaping reached record highs among adults 19 to 30. I went to the NIH to verify the data, and indeed, past year use of marijuana and hallucinogens by adults 35 to 50 continued a long-term upward trajectory and reached an all-time high in 2022. And then there was this from NIH. While binge drinking has generally declined for the past 10 years among younger adults, adults 35 to 50 reported the highest prevalence of binge drinking ever recorded for this age group. Go figure. Yeah. More headlines from Smerconish.com, the Monday edition of the newsletter. We have a piece from the Dayton Daily News talking about back to school and how educators are having to deal with mental health issues made worse by the pandemic, but in progress for the last decade or so. I found this really interesting. I said Dayton, so this is an Ohio story with national significance. More than 3 years after the COVID-19 pandemic started, school-aged kids are still feeling the mental health impacts and stunting communication skills, which can spill over into the classroom. Statewide, expulsions rose by 29% between 2017 and 2018 and the 2021 to 2022 school year. So they've taken out the pandemic, reversing a downward trend. But suspensions both in school and out of school fell by 11%. What does that mean? It means that when kids are getting in trouble in school in Ohio, they're getting in serious trouble because the expulsions are up and the suspensions are down. Another back-to-school story that we have from Alabama.com. It's so funny when I read these they're actually sorority rush stories. I mean, fraternity rush for me meant getting, roused out of bed in the middle of the night, told we had to report to the fraternity to answer trivia questions for what was called a lineup. And if you missed your trivia question, then you had to sing "Do You Know the Muffin Man" while balancing a beer on your head. Okay, that was rush for me. And if you got the wrong answer, you were shot with a fire hose. It's a little something different, especially for the ladies at the University of Alabama. OOTDs, outfits of the day, are what are worn by prospective members during the rush process. Barstool has a story saying that one particular social media posting shows a young lady involved in the rush process wearing an outfit that cost her $22,600. Not for me, thank God. And then there's this. I have to get this in before I wrap up in terms of the headlines. You heard me say last week at the end of the week, I was saying to TC and Dan that the number one show on Netflix is Depp v. Heard. So it's Amber Heard and Johnny Depp, the trial, but it's done differently now. What they've done in this new miniseries is they splice together the competing accounts between Depp and Heard, and they add a lot of commentary, and they throw in a lot of graphics and social media influencers and so forth. But you get to see what she said on a specific issue, and then what he said, and back and forth and back and forth. So a number of people have pointed out, and I'm still hearing from them. Let me serve notice. I now know about this. You don't have to tell me anymore. That they use an audio quote from me, but they attribute it to Danny Savalos, our friend, my guest host, the great legal authority. So I said, like that's not right. Why? And it says, Danny Savalos, as heard on the Smerconish podcast. All right, that's not a bad thing, except it's my commentary. So with that in mind, Timothy Filan, who is a California listener and frequent contributor to Smerconish.com exclusive content, sent a photograph of his TV over the weekend. Over the weekend was the BMW Championship. And for whatever reason, he turned on his television set, and you can see this image in my social media, and up pops a picture of me, and it says BMW Championship, 3rd round, and then it gives the viewing details. It's absolutely bizarre. I had nothing to do with the BMW Championship 3rd round. By the way, one of my friends sent it to me because so many people have seen it in the social media and said, my God, you made it to the 3rd round. I have a 27 handicap. To the people at BMW, the last individual in the world that you want associated with your golf tournament is me. Saturday, we had the closest vote ever at Smerconish.com. with, oh shit, where is it? Pardon me for just a second. Saturday was the blind side. No, Saturday was the one I was thinking of. Where is it? Just give me 1 second. This is really important. Here it is. Should prospective adoptive parents be required to pledge a willingness to be affirming of a child who may later identify as LGBTQIA? We had 36,152 votes cast. It doesn't even matter, like, which was which, but I'll tell you, the no votes were 50.02%. The yes votes, 49.98%. Never have we had a poll question as close as that one at Smerconish.com. And finally, as I've summarized and have been summarizing, there's a lot going on relative to the 2024 presidential cycle, not the least of which is a debate that'll take place on Wednesday night. Former President Trump says he's not going to participate. A CBS poll came out over the weekend showing him with the highest lead he has had so far. He's at 62%. And Ron DeSantis is at 11%, and the others are at half or less of DeSantis. So Trump says, I'm not going to debate. As a matter of fact, I'm not going to come to any of these debates. That's what he said in Truth Social over the weekend. Meanwhile, there's this growing move among academics who are saying he's already ineligible to run for his old job. And today's poll question is, would a ruling by SCOTUS that Donald Trump is ineligible to seek the presidency be met with widespread civil unrest? Go vote. Read the exclusive content by my friend, the law professor Shane Inspector, who says the courts are not the way to beat Donald Trump. See ya.